What drives a man to wield both the pen and the pistol, shaping history with poetry while challenging authority with action? Brendan Behan was more than just a writer. He was a firebrand, a storyteller, and a revolutionary. His name is woven into the literary and political fabric of Ireland, celebrated for his raw, unapologetic voice. He was a man who understood the burden of history, the weight of words, and the fire of rebellion. Born into a working-class Republican family in Dublin in 1923, Behan's early years were infused with nationalist ideals. His father, Stephen Behan, had fought in the War of Independence, and the home was often alive with discussions of Ireland's struggle for self-rule. The Irish language, poetry, and politics were not just subjects, but sacred traditions passed down from one generation to the next. These influences shaped Brendan's worldview, instilling in him a fierce sense of identity and purpose. By the age of 16, Behan was fully immersed in the cause. His commitment to Irish republicanism led him to join the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, believing that armed resistance was necessary to reclaim Ireland from British rule. In 1939, eager to serve the movement, he travelled to England on a bombing mission, a bold and reckless act that resulted in his arrest. The British authorities sentenced him to Borstal, a juvenile detention centre, where he would spend several years in confinement. But prison did not silence Behan. It gave him a new language, one of reflection, raw emotion, and biting satire. While Borstal stripped away his physical freedom, it sharpened his intellect. He encountered individuals from different backgrounds, observing human nature with an acute sense of irony. His experiences in captivity formed the backbone of Borstal Boy, his groundbreaking semi-autobiographical novel, which was published in 1958. The book not only captured Behan's personal struggle, but also confronted issues of class, nationalism, and institutional oppression. It was more than just a prison memoir. It was a voice against injustice, exposing the contradictions within society. Yet Behan's literary genius was not confined to prose. His mastery extended into theatre, where his plays challenged convention with sharp humour, biting political undertones, and deeply human narratives. The Quare Fellow, his first major theatrical success, was staged in Dublin in 1954. The play, set in a prison, explored themes of morality, justice, and the cruelty of the penal system. It was a stark critique of the death penalty, forcing audiences to confront uncomfortable truths about institutional violence. Its success propelled Behan into the international spotlight, earning him comparisons to great playwrights such as Sean O'Casey and Samuel Beckett. Following the acclaim of the Quare Fellow, Behan wrote The Hostage, a powerful piece about an English soldier taken prisoner by the IRA. The play was a chaotic mix of humour, music and tragedy, mirroring the absurdity of war and political conflict. Behan's ability to blend Irish oral storytelling traditions with modern theatrical forms made his work stand out. He did not merely write plays, he crafted experiences, immersing audiences in the chaotic beauty and brutality of life. However, while his literary success soared, Behan battled personal demons. Alcohol became both his comfort and his curse. He was infamous for his drinking habits, often arriving at events intoxicated, derailing interviews with drunken ramblings and engaging in heated arguments fueled by whiskey. His self-destructive tendencies placed immense strain on his relationships and his career, and his health began to deteriorate rapidly. Despite his struggles, his legacy was cemented. Behan was not just a writer, he was a voice of the people, a champion of the oppressed, and a poet of rebellion. His words cut through societal facades, exposing realities often ignored. His early death in 1964 at the age of 41 was a tragic loss, yet his influence endured. His literary contributions remain vital pieces of Irish heritage, celebrated for their wit, authenticity, and fearless defiance. Brendan Behan's story is not just one of artistic brilliance, but of resilience and rebellion. He was the rebel poet, the literary warrior, the man who wielded words like weapons. His legacy is not written in ink alone. It is inscribed in the consciousness of Ireland, etched into its streets, its theatres, and its history. From the early pages of Brendan Behan's life, rebellion was his constant companion. It was not just a political conviction, it was a philosophy, a way of being. He lived with the certainty that art and resistance were inseparable, that literature could carry the weight of a revolution. His story was not one of passive observation. It was a life consumed by action, by words that challenged, and by decisions that could never be undone. Behan's involvement with the IRA was not a fleeting moment of youth. It was a commitment forged in the fires of history. His generation inherited the echoes of Ireland's struggle, a land still bearing the scars of British rule. The cause was deeply personal. He did not see himself as merely a writer, but as a soldier in a literary battlefield, wielding words like weapons. At just 16, his determination led him across the sea to England, prepared to carry out the mission entrusted to him. When he was caught and sentenced to Borstal, prison did not break his spirit. It refined it. Behind bars, he was no longer just an Irish nationalist. He became a chronicler of human suffering, of injustice, and the absurdity of authority. He learned that revolution was not always found in acts of war, but in stories told, in the way words could shift the perception of power. Borstal Boy would later emerge from these experiences, not as a tale of regret, but as an anthem of defiance. Even as is his name synonymous with literary success, Behan could never divorce himself from politics. His plays bore the fingerprints of Ireland's battle for freedom, filled with voices that spoke of oppression, sacrifice, and the bitter reality of rebellion. The Hostage did not simply tell a story, it confronted the world with the human toll of nationalism, the price paid in lives, and the moral contradictions of war. Behan did not ask to be a symbol of resistance. He did not craft his image as a revolutionary figure. He simply lived. Recklessly, brilliantly, without hesitation. His words did not merely entertain, they unsettled, they stirred hearts, they demanded attention. He was never afraid of controversy, nor did he seek to soothe the world with false politeness. He believed in truth, in exposing hypocrisy, in the power of art to awaken the spirit of a nation. But rebellion is a force that consumes. It demands sacrifice, and as Behan poured himself into literature, into the fight for Irish freedom, he slowly burned away the years of his life. Alcohol became his refuge, his coping mechanism, the price he paid for carrying a world too heavy on his shoulders. He was the rebel poet, never willing to surrender, always willing to fight, even when the battle left scars that could never heal. For Brendan Behan, rebellion did not end with politics. It evolved into art. His words were his weapons, and his literary creations carried the weight of struggle, the sting of defiance, and the humour of survival. To Behan, literature was not simply an escape or a form of entertainment. It was an act of resistance, a way to challenge the world, a way to remind the powerful that the oppressed could still speak. His breakthrough, Borstal Boy, was more than an autobiography. It was an indictment of the British prison system, a reflection on nationalism, and a meditation on identity. The book was not written to glorify war or to romanticize rebellion, but rather to show its complexities, its contradictions, and the deeply personal costs attached to it. It captured his youthful idealism, but also his growing disillusionment. As he transitioned into playwriting, Behan did not soften his message. The Quare Fellow forced audiences to grapple with the brutal reality of state-sanctioned execution, stripping away notions of justice and exposing the flawed morality of the legal system. His satire cut deep, blending dark humour with profound tragedy, creating a theatrical experience that lingered long after the curtain fell. With the hostage, Behan's voice grew even louder. The play was chaotic, filled with music, irony, and unpredictable shifts in tone. It mirrored the instability of war, the absurdity of nationalism, and the reckless violence of ideological conflict. It was revolutionary both in message and structure, rejecting conventional storytelling in favor of something raw and unpredictable, something that felt like life itself. Yet, the further Behan went into literature, the deeper he descended into self-destruction. The pressure to constantly provoke, to challenge authority, and to remain a voice of defiance wore him down. His drinking became excessive, his behavior unpredictable. He was consumed by the expectations placed upon him, the weight of being both an artist and an agitator. Even so, his work had already etched itself into Irish literary history. He had changed the way stories were told. He had forced people to look at reality, to confront uncomfortable truths, to find rebellion in every word, every scene, every line of dialogue. Brendan Behan was more than a writer. He was a force of nature, and though he burned brightly, he burned fast. But in those years of creation, he had ensured that his fire would never fully fade. For Brendan Behan, fame was both a gift and a curse. It brought him recognition, success, and admiration, but it also weighed him down with expectations, scrutiny, and the pressure to constantly perform. The rebel writer, once known for his fearless words and unapologetic defiance, found himself struggling against a different kind of adversary, his own notoriety. By the late 1950s, Behan was no longer just a playwright or novelist. He had become a public figure. He was sought after for interviews, invited to prestigious literary events, and treated as a representative of Irish artistic rebellion. His works were celebrated in Dublin, London, and beyond, with critics hailing him as one of Ireland's most compelling voices. But for Behan, fame did not feel like triumph. It felt like confinement, another form of captivity, different from Borstal, but equally suffocating. Success amplified his self-destructive tendencies. The expectation to be Brendan Behan, the fiery genius, the unpredictable provocateur, led him further into alcoholism. His drinking, once a social habit, became a dependency. Interviews turned into spectacles, with Behan often arriving drunk, slurring his words, making cutting remarks that blurred the line between humour and hostility. The public loved him for his wit, but they also enjoyed his chaos. His health deteriorated rapidly. The energy that once fueled his art began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and unpredictability. He struggled to write, failing to match the brilliance of his earlier works. His personal relationships suffered, with friends and family witnessing his decline, powerless to intervene. Fame had made him larger than life, but it had also stolen his ability to live freely. Yet, even in the midst of his struggles, Behan's legacy remained undeniable. His words still carried power. His influence still rippled through Irish literature, and his rebellious spirit still inspired a generation of writers who dared to challenge authority. He may have been battling himself, but his impact on the world was unchanged. Brendan Behan had once been a man who defied expectations, who wrote without fear, who spoke truth even when it was uncomfortable. As fame took its toll, he became a man searching for something that had slipped through his fingers: peace, purpose, and the fire that had once burned so brightly within him. And as his health failed, one question remained. Had his rebellion cost him everything, or had it ensured that he would never truly be forgotten? Brendan Behan did not simply write about Ireland, he embodied it. His works carried the sharp wit, the stubborn resilience, and the defiant spirit of the Irish people. His voice was not polished or restrained. It was raw, loud, and unapologetic, like the streets of Dublin, like the echoes of revolution, like the people who refused to be silenced. He did not belong to literary circles, he belonged to the working class, the dreamers, the rebels, the ones who believed that storytelling was a form of resistance. With every word, he carried the weight of his homeland's struggles. Borstal Boy was more than his story. It was Ireland's, a tale of colonial rule, youthful nationalism, and the bitter consequences of rebellion. The Quare Fellow did not simply critique the prison system. It revealed the cruelty of institutions that had long controlled Irish society. The Hostage was not just a play about an English soldier. It was Ireland speaking through satire, addressing its fractured identity, its never-ending fight for recognition. Behan was never subtle about his patriotism, but neither was he blind to Ireland's contradictions. He loved his country, yet he challenged its politics. He revered its history, yet he mocked its mythologies. He was both a believer and a skeptic, an Irishman who saw his homeland with brutal honesty. He understood that Ireland was not just the fight against British rule, it was the tension between progress and tradition, between nationalism and individual freedom, between art and ideology. As his fame grew, Ireland claimed him as its own, a literary icon, a voice for the people, a man who spoke in pubs and theatres with equal command. But Ireland also weighed heavily upon him. The expectation to represent the nation, to be a symbol of resistance, to constantly carry the fire of rebellion. It exhausted him. He had lived for Ireland, but now he found himself trapped by it. Fame had already taken its toll, but nationalism added another layer of pressure. He drank not just to escape the spotlight, but to quiet the endless conversations about Ireland's future, about politics, about conflict. He did not want to be a mouthpiece for any movement. He wanted to write, to live, to experience the world beyond patriotism. Yet Ireland was in his bones, in his blood, in every word he wrote. He could not escape it. Brendan Behan was a rebel, a writer, a man who carried Ireland wherever he went. And as his health continued to deteriorate, one truth became clear. He had given everything to his country, his art and his people. But had Ireland given him the same in return? Or had it simply taken, expecting him to always have more to give? Brendan Behan lived with intensity, and he died with tragedy. His years of defiance, creativity, and reckless brilliance had taken their toll. By the early 1960s, his health had deteriorated beyond recovery. Alcoholism had consumed him, and his body could no longer fight. On March 20th, 1964, at age 41 years old, he passed away in a Dublin hospital, leaving behind a legacy etched in ink and rebellion. Behan's funeral was an event that reflected his life, grand, chaotic, filled with the voices of Ireland. Thousands gathered in the streets of Dublin to bid farewell to the man who had spoken for them, who had challenged authority, who had made them laugh even in the face of sorrow. It was not a quiet mourning. It was a celebration, an acknowledgement that Behan had lived fully, fiercely, without compromise. His impact did not fade with his death. His words still cut through history. His plays still capture the essence of Irish struggle, and his influence lingers in the voices of writers who dare to speak without fear. Brendan Behan was not simply a man. He was a movement, a force that defied silence. And though he was gone, his fire never truly extinguished.
Step into the past and uncover the heart of Ireland. At Emerald Chronicle, we bring you hundreds of captivating documentaries exploring Irish history, myths, legends, and folklore. Our playlists guide you through Ireland's fascinating journey, from prehistoric Ireland, proto-historic and Celtic eras, and the early Christian and Viking periods, to the Anglo-Irish invasion and the lordship of Ireland.
Delve deeper into the Tudor conquest and religious conflicts, the union with Great Britain and the Great Famine, the fight for independence and the divisions of the 20th century, and Ireland's evolution into the 21st century. Best of all, we keep all our documentaries at 15 minutes or less, making it easy to explore Ireland's history, even on a busy day.
Every time you watch, you're supporting the upkeep of our channel. And when you share Emerald Chronicle, you're helping to promote Irish history and culture worldwide. We kindly ask you to like and share, and subscribe to Emerald Chronicle now. Let's keep Ireland's stories alive together.